March 15, 1945. The air above the Rhine River, near the beleaguered town of Remagen, vibrated with a low, incessant hum of war. American forces, having achieved the impossible a week prior by capturing the Ludendorff Bridge, were now desperately holding on to their tenuous bridgehead. Artillery shells screamed overhead, German machine guns chattered from concealed positions, and the acrid smell of burning fuel and cordite hung heavy, a grim perfume of combat. Among the beleaguered units tasked with holding this critical toehold on German soil was an M4 Sherman tank, its olive-drab paint chipped and scarred from 11 months of brutal fighting across France and Belgium. Inside, Staff Sergeant Thomas "Tommy" Brennan, a 25-year-old gunner from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, gripped the controls of his 75mm main gun. His hands were calloused, his eyes sharp, but a deep weariness etched itself around them. Brennan had fired thousands of rounds in 11 months of combat, but he'd never once considered that the laws of physics might become his greatest weapon. Before we dive into this story, drop a quick hi in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. It really helps support the channel. The crew of Brennan's tank, designated Fury, was a familiar quartet. Lieutenant James Hartley, a stern but fair commander from Boston, peered through his cupola, his face grim. Below him, Private Eddie Kowalski, a stocky driver from Chicago, wrestled the Sherman's controls, trying to keep them out of the direct line of fire from a German Panther tank that had them pinned down. Corporal Marcus Washington, the loader, a quiet giant from rural Georgia, stood ready to ram another shell into the breach. And Private Billy Chen, the assistant driver and hull gunner, a nervous kid from San Francisco, kept his eyes glued to the periscope, his thumb hovering over the intercom button. Their Sherman was one of the last remaining in their forward platoon. 3 other Shermans, visible as charred wrecks a few hundred yards to their left, were testament to the Panther's devastating accuracy. The enemy tank was positioned on a steep hillside approximately 800 yards away, its formidable frontal armor angled perfectly in a hull-down position, exposing only its turret and the top of its gun mantle. Standard doctrine dictated that this was an impossible shot for their 75mm gun. Any direct hit would simply bounce off the thick glacis plate. Hartley's voice, tight with frustration, crackled over the intercom. "Eddie, pull back further. We can't stay here. Their 75s are useless against that thing, Tommy. We're just target practice." Brennan, his eyes pressed to the periscope, studied the Panther's silhouette. He could feel the vibrations of its main gun firing again, a distant boom followed by the sickening thud of another round, impacting harmlessly somewhere nearby. The air grew thick with the metallic tang of fear. The shouts of wounded men from the burning Shermans, slowly fading as the flames consumed them, were a constant, chilling reminder of their precarious position. Hope was a dwindling resource on this stretch of the Rhine. The Panther was an immovable, unkillable beast, its presence an iron fist tightening around the American bridgehead. Brennan, however, wasn't just seeing a tank. He was seeing angles, distances, and surfaces. He saw the sharp incline of the hill, the exposed belly of the Panther when its gun dipped to fire downward, and most crucially, the relatively intact concrete road surface stretching between their position and the Panther's. A thought audacious and bordering on insane began to form in his mind. He ignored Hartley's order to retreat for a moment longer, his finger tracing an imaginary line on the periscope glass, connecting his tank, the concrete, and the enemy. The impossibility of the situation was a challenge, not a surrender. The training, the years in the steel mill, all of it coalesced into a single desperate idea. He knew the odds, he knew the rules. But what if, just this once, the rules could be bent, twisted, or even broken? The Panther's main gun roared again, sending another round screaming past their turret. The near miss jolted him, solidifying his resolve. Brennan's journey to the gunner's seat of a Sherman tank began not on a firing range, but amidst the clang and roar of Pittsburgh's steel mills. Before the war pulled him across an ocean, he'd spent his days navigating the labyrinthine machinery of a massive industrial complex, where understanding angles, trajectories, and the sheer physics of material movement was crucial. He wasn't just a laborer, he was a craftsman who understood how to cut and shape steel, how to predict the arc of a molten stream, and the precise force required to bend metal to his will. This innate grasp of applied physics of cause and effect set him apart. During his gunnery training at Fort Knox, this background often made him seem an oddity. While other recruits mechanically memorized range tables and deflection charts, Brennan questioned everything. His instructor, a gruff but experienced Sergeant Davies, initially found Brennan's incessant what-ifs and how-comes irritating. "Just pull the trigger, Brennan, and trust the numbers," Davies would bellow. But Brennan wouldn't. He'd recalculate, analyze the wind, the temperature, the precise weight of the shell, the slight cant of the tank. Davies eventually recognized Brennan's genius, realizing the young man wasn't being insubordinate, but rather seeking a deeper, more profound understanding of his weapon. Brennan's crew, Hartley, Kowalski, Washington, and Chen, had initially shared Davies's frustration. Brennan's detailed pre-fire calculations, his insistence on adjusting for minutiae, often extended the time it took to get a shot off. But over time, as Brennan's rounds consistently found their mark with unnerving precision, even in challenging situations, their annoyance gave way to a deep, unwavering trust in his methodical approach. The story of the American push across the Rhine had begun 8 days earlier, on March 7th, with Operation Lumberjack. The 9th Armored Division, advancing swiftly, had stumbled upon the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, miraculously still intact. Its capture was an unexpected boon, a golden ticket across the last major natural barrier into the heart of Germany. But the Germans knew its strategic importance. For 8 days they had thrown everything they had at the bridgehead. Desperate counterattacks by infantry, artillery barrages, Luftwaffe raids, and even frogmen attempting to plant explosives. Every hour the American position became more precarious, the pressure on the forward units immense. Securing the bridgehead meant fighting for every inch of ground, and the Panther on the hillside was a symbol of that fierce German resistance, a formidable obstacle blocking any further advance. Back inside Fury, the grim reality of their situation pressed in. Lieutenant Hartley's voice, now sharper, cut through Brennan's thoughts. "Tommy, I'm pulling us back. We're wasting good men and good ammo. That Panther's got us cold." Brennan, however, wasn't ready to concede defeat. His eyes, still glued to the periscope, had found their answer. He had noticed a pattern in the Panther's firing routine. When its main gun dipped to fire down the slope at the American positions, its underbelly, normally protected by the hull-down position, became fleetingly exposed. But the angle was too extreme, the target too small and fleeting for a direct shot. Yet the concrete road below it was a constant. "Sir," Brennan said, his voice surprisingly calm amidst the chaos, "I think I have an idea." Hartley looked back at him, his brow furrowed with exhaustion and skepticism. "An idea? Brennan, we're being systematically picked apart out here. What kind of idea could possibly work against that thing?" Brennan's gaze flickered from the Panther to the stretch of road. "A ricochet shot, sir. Off the concrete. It's the only way." The words hung in the air, audacious and almost unbelievable. Kowalski, hearing it over the intercom, nearly swerved the tank. Washington paused, a fresh round held loosely in his hands. Chen stopped, nervously wiping sweat from his brow. A ricochet shot, in combat, against a Panther. The idea seemed to defy not only military convention, but also common sense. Yet Brennan's tone held a conviction that, for a moment, cut through the pervasive fear. The reaction to Brennan's proposal was exactly as he'd anticipated. A stunned silence was quickly replaced by a wave of skepticism. "So you want to shoot at the ground?" Corporal Washington asked, his voice incredulous. The 75mm M61 armor-piercing shell still clutched loosely in his hands. Lieutenant Hartley stared at Brennan, his face a mask of disbelief. "Brennan, are you serious? We don't have time for theory. We need to disable that tank, not make fireworks displays off the road." But Brennan held his ground, his logic clear and unwavering, despite the mounting pressure. "Sir, hear me out. The Panther's belly armor is only 16 millimeters thick. Our 75mm M3 gun, firing an M61 AP round, can penetrate 68 millimeters of armor at 1,000 yards when striking at a 30-degree angle. This isn't direct fire, sir. This is geometry." He began to rattle off calculations, his voice precise and unhurried, as if explaining a blueprint in the steel mill. The concrete road surface, assuming a 15-degree impact angle, should deflect the round upwards by approximately 30 degrees. At 800 yards, that deflection would put the shell right into the Panther's underbelly as it dips its gun to fire. It's the only vulnerable spot, sir, and it's exposed for a brief moment every time it engages. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. The math, Brennan's math, always seemed to work out. But a ricochet shot in combat? It was unheard of. Training manuals certainly didn't cover it. It was a theoretical possibility at best. An experimental concept in controlled environments, never attempted in the brutal reality of a live battlefield. The stakes were too high. 3 Shermans were burning, their crews either dead or screaming for help. The lives of the remaining platoon, the integrity of the entire Remagen bridgehead, all hung in the balance. Hartley, his mind racing, weighed the desperation of their situation against the sheer audacity of Brennan's plan. Retreat meant conceding vital ground and more casualties. A direct hit was impossible. This was impossibly their only chance. He looked at Brennan, then at the burning Shermans. The smell of burning rubber and flesh was thick, clinging to their clothes and hair. The rattle of the German MG-42 machine guns on the hillside was a constant reminder of their precarious existence. He made his decision. "All right, Brennan." Hartley's voice was grim, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes, a mix of desperation and a grudging respect for the gunner's unconventional thinking. "You've got one shot. Make it count." The weight of those words, the pressure of a desperate commander, the lives of his crew and the fate of an entire company of GIs, settled heavily on Brennan. He nodded, his hands already moving with purpose, adjusting the traverse and elevation. "Eddie, I need you to angle us. Just a hair to the left, then hold steady. I need a perfectly stable platform for this." Kowalski, his face pale but determined, began to maneuver the Sherman, inching it into the precise position Brennan needed, exposing them further to the Panther's fire, but providing the crucial angle. Inside the cramped turret, Corporal Washington moved like a ghost, his hands expertly retrieving a fresh M61 armor-piercing shell from the ready rack. He slid it into the breech with a practiced efficiency that belied the tension in the air. The faint metallic taste of cordite was already in Brennan's mouth, a phantom taste of battles past. Sweat ran down his face, stinging his eyes, but his hands, calloused and strong, remained steady on the traverse and elevation wheels. Billy Chen, the assistant driver, usually fidgety, was now perfectly still, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and awe, ready to spot the impact. Every second stretched into an eternity. The German Panther, oblivious to the impossible gamble about to be made, dipped its menacing gun, ready to unleash another devastating round. This was it. Brennan's breathing technique was an inheritance from his father, a WWI sniper who had taught him the disciplined rhythm of breath control, how to calm the body and sharpen the mind before a critical shot. Inhale slowly, exhale completely. Hold for a count of 3, then squeeze. He focused, his world narrowing to the crosshairs in his sight and the small, vital patch of concrete road below the Panther. The moment the Panther's gun dipped, exposing its underbelly, Brennan squeezed the firing button. The Sherman shuddered violently as the 75mm main gun roared, momentarily deafening the crew. A brilliant flash filled the cramped turret, followed by the acrid smell of burnt propellant. The M61 armor-piercing shell, a bright tracer element burning fiercely behind it, streaked across the 800 yards separating them from the enemy. Time seemed to slow. Everyone in fury held their breath, their eyes fixed on the tracer. It arced, a fiery comet against the grey sky, and then, with an ear-splitting crack, it struck the concrete road surface directly beneath the Panther. A geyser of pulverized concrete and sparks erupted, momentarily obscuring the German tank. Then, the impossible happened. From the center of that explosive shower, a new, deadly projectile, now glowing red-hot, seemed to leap upwards at a violent angle. It was the M61 round, perfectly deflected, its trajectory altered precisely as Brennan had calculated. With sickening force, it slammed into the Panther's exposed belly armor. There was a dull, heavy thud, instantly followed by a catastrophic internal explosion. Flames erupted from every hatch, a black column of smoke coiling into the sky. The Panther's massive turret, weighing several tons, was ripped from its mounting, and hurled 15 feet into the air, spinning end over end before crashing back to the earth with a deafening clang. A secondary explosion, the Panther's ammunition rack detonating, tore through the German tank, reducing it to a twisted, burning hulk. A profound, almost unnatural silence fell across the battlefield. For 3 long seconds, not a single shot was fired, not a single machine gun chattered. The world held its breath. Then chaos erupted. From the American positions, a wave of cheers, shouts, and triumphant whoops rose. Infantrymen emerged from cover, firing their rifles into the air. On the radio, frantic voices from other tank crews demanded an explanation. What in God's name just happened? Fury, report, Fury, did you just kill that Panther? Inside Fury, Lieutenant Hartley was speechless, staring at the burning wreck, his mouth agape. Corporal Washington, slowly lowering the spent casing, murmured, "Did that just happen?" Eddie Kowalski let out a whoop, slamming his hand on the dashboard. "Tommy, you magnificent son of a bitch!" Private Chen, a wide grin splitting his face, was already reaching for another round, his earlier nervousness completely forgotten. But Brennan's mind was already racing. He knew the battle wasn't over. As if on cue, 2 more German tanks, a Panzer IV and another formidable Panther, emerged from the tree line about 600 yards away, their guns swiveling towards the American positions. Can he replicate the shot? Different angles, different distances, different surface materials. The challenge was immense, but the impossible had just become possible. Brennan's success against the first Panther had been a moment of sheer tactical brilliance, but the sudden appearance of 2 more German tanks immediately reset the clock. He had surprised them once, but the element of surprise was gone. He quickly adjusted his sights, now aiming for the Panzer IV, the closer of the 2, which was attempting to flank their position. This time there was no intact stretch of concrete road. His eyes scanned the terrain, finally settling on a jagged fragment of a stone wall, blown apart by earlier shelling, partially jutting out from the debris-strewn ground. The angle was less ideal, the surface less predictable, but it was his only option. "Eddie, move us slightly forward." 5 degrees to port," Brennan commanded, his voice tight with concentration. Kowalski obeyed, maneuvering the Sherman with practiced skill. Washington slammed another M61 AP round into the breach. Brennan fired. The tracer streaked, hit the stone wall, and fragmented with a shower of sparks. The shell did deflect, but not perfectly. Instead of a killing blow, it slammed into the Panzer IV's drive sprocket, tearing away part of its track. The German tank shuddered to a halt, immobilized, its crew momentarily disoriented, but still capable of firing. A partial success, but not the decisive hit he needed. The second Panther, its commander now acutely aware of the Americans' unusual tactics, was proving to be a much more cunning opponent. Hauptmann Friedrich Wolf, a seasoned veteran of the brutal Eastern Front, had clearly observed the demise of his comrade. Instead of exposing his underbelly, Wolf kept his Panther's formidable frontal armor presented and expertly used the terrain, repositioning frequently to deny Brennan any viable ricochet angles. It became a cat-and-mouse engagement, a deadly duel of wits. Brennan, inside his Sherman, frantically searched for any hard surface, a rock, another piece of concrete, even a shattered tree trunk, that could provide the precise angle of deflection. Wolf, in turn, adapted his tactics, moving from cover to cover, his powerful 88-meter gun occasionally spitting fire, forcing the American infantry to hug the dirt. A strange, grudging respect developed between the 2 adversaries, a silent acknowledgement of their opponent's skill in the crucible of battle. Brennan's crew worked with an almost telepathic synchronization. Lieutenant Hartley, now fully committed to Brennan's unorthodox methods, called out ranges and adjusted their position with expert precision, keeping the Sherman out of the worst of the Panther's fire. Kowalski, anticipating Brennan's needs, positioned the tank with astonishing accuracy, inching it forward, backward, or sideways by mere feet to create or deny an angle. Washington, a blur of motion, loaded fresh rounds into the breach in under 5 seconds, his large hands moving with an almost mechanical rhythm. Chen, no longer nervous, was an eagle-eyed spotter, calling out impacts and corrections, his youthful exuberance a stark contrast to the grim reality of the battle. The Sherman's 75mm gun, usually slow, fired 8 rounds in 3 minutes, each shot a calculated risk. Then, Brennan had his breakthrough. His eyes caught sight of the first Panther, still burning fiercely, its twisted hulk an immobile fixture on the hillside. The destroyed tank's sloped armor, though scarred and blackened, presented a new, unexpected opportunity. "Hartley, range to the first Panther," he barked. "Then, I need a shot to deflect off its hull, up into the side of the second Panther." Hartley, without hesitation, gave him the range. Brennan adjusted his sights, making an even more complex series of calculations in his head. It was a shot within a shot, a deflection off a deflection. He squeezed the trigger. The M61 round left the barrel, arced, and struck the sloped, burning hull of the first Panther. A shower of molten metal and sparks erupted, and again the shell defied logic. It ricocheted cleanly, not into the sky but directly towards the side armor of the second Panther, which had momentarily exposed itself during a repositioning maneuver. The M61 slammed into the German tank's side, a catastrophic penetration. Flames immediately erupted, and the distinct sound of secondary explosions ripped through the air. Black smoke billowed, and within seconds, German crewmen began bailing out, their figures silhouetted against the inferno. The battle for this sector was over. The immobilized Panzer IV, its crew seeing the fiery end of its comrades, raised a white flag. 17 minutes. That's all it had taken. In the immediate aftermath, the ground around the now silent hillside thrummed with a different kind of energy. The cheers of the American infantry had subsided into a general murmur of relief and cautious celebration. Battalion Commander Colonel Robert Hayes, a grizzled veteran whose face usually showed only the strains of command, arrived at Brennan's Sherman, his expression a mix of disbelief and stern curiosity. "Sergeant Brennan," he boomed, "I want an explanation, and it better be good." Brennan, still slightly dazed by the adrenaline, stepped out of the turret. Without a word, he picked up a handful of rocks and a sturdy stick. On the dusty ground, he painstakingly demonstrated the geometry, using the stick to represent the shell's trajectory, the rocks for the Panther, and a flattened tin can for the concrete. Hayes watched, his initial skepticism slowly giving way to a look of utter amazement. "You shot a tank? With a bank shot?" he muttered, shaking his head. "Sergeant, you're going to teach this to every gunner in the 9th Armored, understand?" Word of Brennan's ricochet spread like wildfire. From the 9th Armored Division, it reached 1st Army headquarters, and soon, across all Allied forces in Europe. Gunnery instructors, steeped in traditional doctrine, were initially dismissive. "A trick shot," they'd scoff, "not replicable in combat." But Brennan, under Hayes's orders, proved them wrong in repeated demonstrations, using inert rounds and simulated targets. The technique, while requiring specific conditions, a hard surface at the correct angle, precise distance calculation, and an exceptional gunner, was indeed teachable. It was difficult, highly situational, but possible. In the final 7 weeks of the European War, documented records show 27 instances of successful ricochet shots by Allied tank gunners, resulting in 19 German tank kills and 8 immobilizations. Brennan himself was personally credited with 6 total ricochet kills before the war's end, further cementing his legendary status. Captured German documents later revealed that in April 1945, German tank commanders were warned about American ricochet tactics, a new and unexpected threat. Hauptmann Friedrich Wolff, the Panther commander who had survived Brennan's second ricochet, was interviewed post-war. He expressed a professional admiration for his opponent. "It was brilliant and terrifying. We trained for direct fire, not geometry." After the war, Brennan received the Silver Star for his actions at Remagen. He returned to Pittsburgh, not to the steel mills, but to pursue higher education, eventually becoming a mechanical engineer. Later in life, he taught physics at a local community college, perhaps finding a quiet satisfaction in sharing the laws of the universe that had once saved his life. He passed away in 1998 at the age of 78. His unconventional technique was studied at the Fort Knox Armor School for decades, even as tank technology advanced, until modern tanks and munitions rendered it largely obsolete. The personal impact of that day lingered. Corporal Marcus Washington became a lifelong friend, serving as Brennan's best man at his wedding. Lieutenant James Hartley credited Brennan with saving his life 3 more times before the war ended, their bond forged in the crucible of that impossible afternoon. Kowalski and Chen attended annual reunions with Brennan until their own deaths. Brennan's innovation represented a core tenet of American pragmatism and adaptability. While German engineering often focused on superior, heavily armored designs, American forces frequently emphasized creative tactics and individual initiative to overcome numerical or technological disadvantages. The ricochet technique, born of desperation and ingenuity, symbolized this philosophy perfectly. Its technical legacy lives on. Modern tank warfare doctrine includes non-standard trajectory engagement in training manuals, a direct descendant of Brennan's wartime improvisation. Computer-assisted targeting systems can now calculate such complex ricochet angles automatically, a testament to the foresight of one tank gunner. The afternoon of March 15, 1945, lasted only 17 minutes of actual combat, but it demonstrated how one soldier's willingness to question doctrine, combined with practical knowledge and desperate courage, could fundamentally change tactical warfare. Brennan never considered himself a hero, just a guy who remembered his high school geometry. The burned-out Panther remained on the hillside near Remagen for months after the war, a monument to impossible shots and the men who dared attempt them. Local German civilians came to call it Der Wunderwinkel, the miracle angle. And that concludes our story. If you made it this far, please share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this historical account surprised you most? Don't forget to subscribe for more untold stories from World War II, and check out the video on screen for another incredible tale from history. Until next time.